We resonate with weakness because it's a spot-on reflection of ourselves. It's why we don't get straight A's or play quarterback in the NFL or know how to talk to women. The Bachelor is weak, Paul is weak, and we're weak. Now, if I leave you with Mr. Bachelor's groundbreaking insight about strength and vulnerability, I would not be leaving you with much. Because this is not what Paul's talking about in this passage. Paul's saying something much more provocative and much more powerful than Brad's therapist ever said. Paul goes beyond talking about the brokenness of humanity, beyond our selfishness, our deceit, our overall propensity towards dehumanizing our God-given humanness. Paul's not just talking about the smug vulnerability of a silent, beautiful, and kind of old man. He's also talking about real pain. The thorn is real pain. It's the worst kind of pain because the thorn is a metaphor for the hurt that is outside of your control and not your fault. Thorn is outside your control and it's not your fault. It's baggage from your childhood, a disease that slows you down, or an accident that has left you shaken to your core. But the good news is that these weaknesses, hardships, insults, persecutions, and calamities are redeemable. Paul is arguing that God takes these struggles, whether self-inflicted, like with the Bachelor here, or through no fault of your own, and makes them valuable. In view of Paul's counterintuitive claims of 2 Corinthians 12, I'm going to use the rest of tonight to explain why a thorn, which is a persistent struggle that is not your fault, is actually a good thing. And then once again, I'm going to go crazy and I'm going to explain why it's a really good thing. But first, a thorn is good because it's humbling. A thorn is good because it's humbling. In verse 7, Paul says, "A thorn was given me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan sent to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited." The thorn was clearly given to Paul for a reason. It was to keep him from becoming conceited. Now, there are several reasons why it'd be good for Paul to avoid being conceited. Who would want to be around him? No one would listen to him, and his ministry to proclaim the good news of Jesus would be extremely difficult. So to keep Paul from becoming conceited, a thorn was given him. And it makes sense that a pervasive problem can only be healed through a pervasive solution. Unless we'd be confused, this thorn was not what Paul had in mind. And it's definitely not what you or I have in mind. No one is going to sign up on a clipboard that reads, "Free broken leg, sign up today." You know. Oh, you're coming around, you know. No one's signing that, I hope. But sometimes ish happens, right? Ish is going to happen because you don't sign up for those things. And long ago, I was but a young sophomore in college, long ago, and I prided myself on snowboarding 30 days a year. And it felt really good to tell folks like you how I had a super long weekend to enjoy fresh pow-pow. And you know what I'm talking about, Bambi. On top of that, I managed to get good grades because I would study all week, nonstop. My whole 3 to 4 day school week was filled with studying. And it was pretty cool, I thought. My life was all about pushing through the week on my own in order to enjoy the snow. And this only added to pride. Now one day, I'm riding down the mountain, and I'm feeling pretty good. I'm pumped. I remember this clearly. I went up to a box, did a nice spin, nice slide, nice landing, smooth. I am flowing at this point. I see this big jump, and I'm ready. Let's do this. No, it did not go according to plan. Let's just say I went too fast and I fell way too hard. My back was severely swollen and I had a major concussion. Now I say this because after my fall, I went from a guy who successfully did everything on his own to a guy who couldn't distinguish one day from another. I went from a seemingly unbreakable snowboarder to someone who needed to be rushed to the hospital if I were to hit my head again. Now, has something like this ever happened to you? You go from self-sufficiency to constant need. Maybe it was a breakup, or losing a loved one, or an injury such as this. Whatever it was or is, it puts us in need of outside help. And this neediness, this thorn, creates an inability to live life how we want. But the good news is that a thorn which comes from outside our control or fault is humbling. It frees us from a lonely, conceited, and self-sustained lifestyle. This is good because we suddenly need community really bad once we are no longer defined by our self-sufficiency. And this is exactly what happened to me. I did not connect with the college life community until I was forcefully removed from my self-serving attitude. This injury showed me that community lasts a lot longer than a season in the snow. And that is an example of a hardship redeemed by God into something valuable. Because weaknesses draw hurting, incomplete people together to rely on each other for what they lack. Weaknesses draw incomplete and hurting people together to rely on each other for what they lack. And the inherent humility caused by a thorn is good because it makes community both necessary and beautiful. This passage, which is about a thorn, forces us to ask, why is a thorn beneficial? Why is it good to have a thorn? The first answer is that a thorn is good because it's humbling. It's a rake to the face reminder that we are no better than anyone else. And in turn, this adds value to community. The second answer is that a thorn is good, really good, because it unleashes divine power. A thorn is really good because it unleashes divine power. And obviously, that just sounds good. I mean, right? Verses 8 through 9 say, 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that the thorn should leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. We can rejoice in our thorns because the power of Christ will rest on us. This is the same power that is made perfect. It is made perfect in weakness. Christian author Darrell Johnson helps make sense of this perfect power. The greatest power in the universe is the weakness of sacrificial love. And the greatest wisdom in the universe is the foolishness of sacrificial love. I'll repeat that. The greatest power in the universe is the weakness of sacrificial love. And the greatest wisdom in the universe is the foolishness of sacrificial love. Guys, we live in an upside-down world, and things are not as they seem. We worship a God who made a spectacle of the strong through his sacrificial love, through Christ crucified for our sins. In reality, the strong are not strong. As Paul says it best, is when we are weak, then we are strong. So what then must we do if our awareness of the thorn collides with the wonderful truth that in the thorn, divine power is unleashed? We stop hiding behind a facade of unreal strength. We accept our real weakness. It is these weaknesses that gave Christ his eternal crown. We stop asking for comfort and happiness, because these things do not correlate with kingdom effectiveness or God's will. Like Paul, we aim to become content in weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. Because our being content with a thorn is directly related to how we humble ourselves and let Christ's perfect power, which came from his weakness, rest on us. Paul had this thorn, and it was not comfortable. In medical terms, the thorn was chronic and not acute. The thorn was not an inherently good thing. It was a messenger from Satan sent to harass him. This is why Paul prayed for the thorn's removal. He prayed God would take this struggle away. And who wouldn't? The thorn was not removed. God relieved the thorn, but did not remove it. He extended grace, but not strength. God relieved the thorn, but he doesn't remove it. He extends grace, but not strength. Verse 8 says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And these are red letters. These are red letters. They're written in red letters, right? This is the written word of Jesus from his mouth. This came from Jesus himself. Paul did not figure this truth statement out on his own. He heard it. He heard it from Jesus. And this was an example of the grace given him. Christ's grace is sufficient in our weakness. Grace reaches its fullest measure in weakness. Think Christ crucified, the Son of God, nailed to a cross, amounts to victory, not defeat. In sacrificial love, sins are forgiven, Our lives are saved, and we can celebrate eternally. Grace reaches fullness in weakness. This is good news because I don't know about you, but I'm pretty weak. We all, in my estimation, deal with persistent struggles that are completely unmanageable on our own. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus graciously assures us of the good news that blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. I hope you're seeing this, just the immense beauty of weakness and how Jesus has paved the way. Because he was the one who wore the crown of thorns, was he not? If we look at Philippians 2:8, we begin to understand whose company we are in when we have this thorn. It just reads, "And being found in human form, Jesus humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross." Jesus' thorn was bearing the burden of our sins. We are not alone in this struggle because he has paved the way with his thorn. So there is a divine secret that Paul is sharing with us here. It is the reason for his contentment in his thorn. The secret is this. The gorgeous and seemingly absurd assertion of Christianity is that weakness, not strength, qualifies us for kingdom service. Just as weakness and not strength was the mechanism of Jesus' ministry through his life, death, and resurrection on the cross. And if weakness qualifies us for service, then grace fuels it. And think about it in terms of fossil fuels versus solar energy, which is basically oil. Grace is like solar power. It's clean, it's safe, it doesn't come from us. Grace comes from outside of ourselves and outside of this world. This energy is hard to tap into since we're not usually willing to accept our weakness. But when we do, we recognize that this energy is always healthy and always renewable. It's constantly offered to us. Constantly. All we have to do is accept our need for a more reliable source of energy. Grace is this source. Grace is God's unmerited favor to humanity. It is God meeting our weakness with his goodness. Grace is where our hope lies. Author and Dr. Gerald May says it best. Grace can transcend repression, addiction, and every other internal or external power that seeks to oppress the freedom of the human heart. That is, grace can transcend repression, addiction, and every other internal or external power that seeks to oppress the freedom of the human heart. In the weakness of our thorn, the unleashed power of Jesus rests on us. This unleashed power is not strength. It's grace. It's the Father's arms wide open, his face filled with compassion. The Father who says, you don't have to do this on your own. I don't want to see you do this on your own. Let me help you. Last summer, I planned to serve at a Christian camp for 10 weeks, which is like the duration of the summer, obviously. I spent all of spring quarter preparing myself spiritually and physically for the long summer. I forced myself to wake up at 7 a.m. every day, which is really difficult, to pray for these campers who would be coming each week. I felt capable and ready to serve God and follow one of my passions in spending quality time with high school students throughout this entire summer. The first week of camp was awesome. I really felt like I was getting the hang of my job and connecting with the students. Before camp, I was unsure about serving another summer of early wake-ups and minimal sleep. On top of that, I had been feeling really lonely in my relationship with God. However, by the end of the first week, I was convinced that this is what I wanted to do. God used the high school students to inject life into me. This was much needed. Shortly after finding peace and hope in the summer ahead, a series of confrontations with the camp director changed everything. The director believed that I was not obedient to his leadership. He also questioned my openness inability to serve. Plain and simple, he didn't trust me. I knew this and tried to handle everything as openly and honestly as I could. The more I opened up, the worse things got. It was a classic example of thinking far too much, trying to do everything right, and incidentally doing everything wrong. And I don't know if you've had that situation happen before, but it's pretty rough.